But had the swim been a half a mile shorter, it would have been far less dramatic. Had it been a half a mile longer, they would have had to pull me out.
Welcome to Ep.1 of the Ultraswimming podcast, recorded the 27th of September, 2025. I'm your co-host, Evan Morrison.
And I'm your co-host, Jessica Kiris. We're on the core team of the Marathon Swimmers Federation. If this is your first time listening to the Ultraswimming podcast, we suggest checking out the previous mini episode, which we're calling Episode 0, for a brief introduction to ourselves and to the podcast. But for now, we'll get straight to our first guest.
In this episode, we interviewed Karen Zemlin about her unprecedented route across Lake Superior, from Isle Royale, Michigan to Pigeon Point, Minnesota. The route measures 22.9 kilometers or 14.2 miles, and Karen completed it in 6 hours and 12 minutes on August 13th, 2025.
In our interview, we discussed Karen's past experiences with Lake Superior, how she designed this route and planned the swim. We talked about how the unique geography of the lake led to a 20-degree Fahrenheit temperature drop over the course of the swim, all the way down to 46 degrees Fahrenheit or 8 degrees Celsius, and what Karen and her team did to cope with the cold.
We also discussed some of the other historical routes and swims on Lake Superior, and the role of experience and self-awareness in being able to safely pursue a challenge like this one.
I thought the interview went great, and I really enjoyed the part where she talked about that self-awareness and how she was able to continue self-monitoring even when she got really cold, which is a challenge for a lot of swimmers. And I thought, wow, that's a skill level that really only comes with a lot of experience.
Yeah, I think I'm very glad we're starting our podcast with this guest. To me, Karen and her swim represent the very best of what our sport has to offer. She was not following anyone else's list. She found some amazing water almost in her own backyard and planned a really challenging and interesting route across it that no one had ever done before. She found a boat pilot. She planned it. She did the research, and she got it done. So I think it's a great example for people looking to forge their own way in our sport.
Without further ado, here's our conversation with Karen Zemlin. Thank you for listening and enjoy the episode.
Okay, today we have a very special guest for the first ever episode of the Ultraswimming podcast, Karen Zemlin. Karen hails from the U.S. state of Minnesota, and since this is a swimming podcast, it's worth mentioning that Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes. Two of the largest of which Karen has now swum across, Lake Mille Lacs twice, and most recently a very interesting and challenging route across frigid Lake Superior. Karen's one of the most accomplished, if not the most accomplished, solo marathon swimmer ever from Minnesota. In 2020, she was the first marathon swimmer inducted into the Minnesota Swimming Hall of Fame. She completed the Triple Crown of open water swimming in 2019 and placed first overall in two of the longest American marathon swim races. Wet in 2013, that's down the Red River in North Dakota, and Tampa Bay Marathon Swim in 2018. So arguably most impressive of all was her most recent swim in Lake Superior between Isle Royale, Michigan, and Pigeon Point, Minnesota. It's 23 kilometers or a little over 14 miles.
Awesome. That was a really good summary. So, Karen, you've swum all over the world. What drew you to swim in Lake Superior? What's your relationship like with that lake, and how has it developed and changed over the years?
You know, Lake Superior is iconic for people that live in this region. All around Lake Superior, we're all drawn to the lake for different reasons. My dad was also a marathon swimmer, and he had made an attempt on the English Channel in 2007. So he and I started training up there in the years prior to his attempt across the English Channel. So I've been swimming up there along the shore for over 20 years. And so it just felt like after all the ocean swimming I've done, it was time to do something a little different in a lake, this large lake closer to home.
Wow, that's awesome. So you did a swim around Madeline Island in 2014, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I saw in the long swims database, it was around 32 kilometers and
Mm-hmm.
just under 9 hours. So you had done that in 2014, and here we
Mm-hmm.
are, over 10 years later. What was the difference like between
Well,
those two routes? And I mean, I know we'll get into that more with the water
sure.
temperature and stuff, but yeah, I'm just
It,
curious. So much, had anything changed, or was it all the same?
For sure, because we know this as ultra marathon swimmers. We know that every route is a little bit different, and every route can be, even the same route can be so different from time to time. There's a big difference between staying around the outskirts of an island, so around Madeline Island, staying really near shore. I was never more than, I mean, I was very close to Madeline Island, but even I was 2 miles from the mainland. But if Isle Royale is 14 miles from the mainland, so you finally get, it was my first experience that far away from a shore of Lake Superior. So as much as 14 isn't very long compared to what many of us are doing, it was certainly the I had this, because of how dramatic it got at the end with the water temperature. That was certainly as far as I was going to be able to go that day without being pulled out. So it all came together for sure.
Karen, about the swim around Apostle Island that you did, and
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was part of an event, right?
Well, it was
And so
called, yeah, it was, yep. Oh, sorry.
as most people were doing relays and you did a solo or something like that, if I recall
Mm-hmm.
correctly. It was a while
Yep.
ago.
It was set up to be a relay, but I had I was familiar with the people running the event, so they were comfortable with me going up and signing up for a solo. And what's great about that island is, as you get around the island, you're at different places. You're more exposed to the big lake in some areas of the island, and it really changes the water conditions compared to when you're kind of blocked from the big part of the lake. So that was what I loved so much about that swim.
So I know they had it for at least a couple of years. Are there any
Uh-huh.
plans to bring that back? It seems like a pretty amazing place to swim and see and
It was
everything.
a
Just
good fundraiser for their community for a short period of time. I feel like they decided to focus more and on the Bayfield Point to La Point swim, the 2 mile
right.
from Bayfield out to Madeline Island, La Point, because they could make it was so accessible. I love that because it's so accessible for more people to jump in and enjoy the lake. Going all the way around the island, even in a relay, is a big commitment for people, but having just a 2 mile swim that's so well protected between the mainland and the island really makes it accessible for more and more people to be able to come and just be a part of the open water community, even though it's not a marathon.
So what was the water temperature on that swim? And were you the only one without a wetsuit?
Um, I might have been the only one without a wetsuit. It was 64 and overcast that day, so the air temperature was cooler than than the water temperature, and no sun. So it was a good training swim for me. I was still trying to prepare myself for my first attempt across the English Channel. Um, and
Hmm.
so yeah, I needed all the experience I could get.
Great. Yeah. So how did you set up this swim, this recent Lake Superior swim from Pigeon, to Pigeon Point? So I imagine you had to hire a boat, you had to put a crew together.
Yeah,
Um, what
I
was
was
that
lucky.
like?
Yeah, I was lucky. It all came together. It over the last few years. A couple of things really needed to come together. Minnesota has a short open water season. And so the captains that are familiar with Superior in the way that we need them to be, really familiar with the route and the water and and things that can come up in that, um, they're busy doing other things at that in that they're already they're dive boat captains or they're sailboat captains. They have excursions they're going on. So it's been really hard to to reel one in and get them interested in doing a solo swim attempt. They just can make so much money in such a short window of time. It took a long time to identify the right person, and this swim is so remote. There's not necessarily a lot of captains that are really familiar with that water that far north.
Mm.
We got lucky over the last couple of years. I made friends with a sailboat captain, and he found he kind of wiggled his way through some his list of friends, and he pulled in the right person with the right boat, and we were able to pull it together.
Wow. So like if we have people listening right now who are like, maybe by the end of the episode, they're a little bit of your courageousness and pioneering spirit wears off on them. What would a swimmer do if they wanted to do this route or something like it? Would they do something similar, like befriend a sailboat captain somewhere? Or how,
No,
do you have any advice for people planning a swim like this?
I do. I'm super excited you asked that, because my husband and I are just going to pull the resources together, and we're going to hopefully have it up by the beginning of the next year, 2026. That's just a quick resource for people that are interested in trying out more things in Superior. Now that there's a west crossing, and now there's an east crossing, and now we have a northern crossing. If we can, I've been just gathering my notes, and I'm going to just put them together, and we're going to put them up on a website and people can reach out. Let's see if we can get some more people out here doing some things, because these aren't the only 3 routes. There are other things to swim in Superior. So I hope people do come.
That would be amazing. What a resource.
So one of the really interesting things about your swim from a route perspective, which is the perspective I often like to look at swimming from, is that this is kind of a channel crossing, but it's in a lake. You don't get that too often. So you're starting on this peninsula out in the middle of the lake and then swimming into the mainland. I can't think of too many lakes where you can do a channel crossing.
It's true.
And so aside from that, which I'm sure occurred to you before, but what was it about this route that attracted you in the first place and that motivated you to plan it?
So, and like I said, this Lake Superior and Isle Royale are just iconic for people in this region. We're all familiar with. It's just like Isle Royale is so wild and so remote and so undeveloped. It's just like it's a national park. It's a national forest park. The whole island is. People hike it. They camp it. I mean, where they have to carry all their own gear. It's the biggest island on the biggest lake in the world. So by surface area, Lake Superior is the biggest lake in the world. It's 31,000 square miles big. So, and so this is, so to swim from the biggest island, that's the biggest island on a lake in the world. There's no island as big on any other lake anywhere in the world. So it's already the biggest island on the biggest lake. Why wouldn't you want to swim from the biggest island? And the reason we started on the island is because the rangers wanted. We had the feeling like the rangers just didn't want to deal with any emergencies that might come up from somebody trying this kind of event. So they wanted to know when I was going to start, because as soon as I got 2 miles away, they knew that they didn't have to deal with my emergencies anymore. It would be the Coast Guard. And so they didn't want to wait all day for me to get there. They just wanted me to get out of their waters. So they didn't have to be in charge of any rescuing that needed to happen. Although none was needed. So it was a good day.
Were you pretty close to needing to be rescued? About how much longer?
Well, yeah. So it's true, because of the falling water temperatures and because of the lake effect of the upwelling, because of the wind direction. We can slow down and talk about all that if you want to get into that a little bit more. Had the swim been a half a mile shorter, it would have been far less dramatic. Had it been a half a mile longer, they would have had to pull me out. Then the last quarter mile, the only reason I could get it done is because it was only a quarter mile, and it took everybody's focus and everybody's attention to get me that last quarter of a mile. But I was able to do it. It would have been nice if had it been a half a mile shorter, possibly, for everybody's emotions even.
Yeah, that was a striking part of your narrative. and also just your discussion of the geography of the lake and how it creates that upwelling.
Uh-huh.
And so for people just listening to the podcast and learning about the swim and maybe the details of the swim for the first time,
Uh-huh.
it would be great to hear from you about how the geography of the lake and that type of that particular area of the lake, how it creates the upwelling,
Uh-huh.
how the different factors weigh into that. I just thought you did an amazing job of describing those things in your narrative. So I think people would be really interested to hear that.
In a lake the size of Superior, winds out farther on the lake that you can't see near shore because it's protected by the trees can be affecting the water quality. The water conditions. So I could tell my boat captain, who's inexperienced with having a swimmer in the water. So he and I were working on this, and I'm helping him learn through this. So I can tell that my boat captain and my team were trying to put me in the calmest water possible, and I mean that sounds great. Because Lake Superior could have really big waves. So I'm like, okay, all right. But in Lake Superior and lakes of large sizes, if the wind happens to be blowing away from the ending shore, so um, and it's calm at the ending shore, that is moving the warmer top water away from the ending shore, and then it brings up the colder bottom water. So that rises to the surface. And so they have in larger lakes, and even smaller lakes will have thermoclines. So in Minnesota, we're used to swimming in thermoclines where when we're swimming on the top of the water, maybe it feels like 65 degrees. But if we go vertical and our feet are dangling down, we can feel that really cold water. It might be 2 feet below, it might be 4 feet below, but we're going to feel it somewhere as it's warming up in the spring. But Lake Superior always has cold water somewhere, even if it's just below the surface. It might be across the lake because the wind is blowing towards me, and now the warm water is blown to my side of the lake. And if it blows the other direction, it's going to blow that warm water to the other side of the lake. So when I was training for the English Channel, I would look at wind direction, and I would decide which side of the lake I'm going to drive to. Am I going to drive over to the Wisconsin side of the lake, or am I going to be on the Minnesota side of the lake to train that weekend based on the wind direction? So that's the kind of thing I was thinking about. And so I knew we were checking water temperature. There's not great buoys out there recording water temperature for us because it's too remote. So we were doing some in the moment readings. We were watching some websites that predicted the water temperature. Yeah, it wasn't, I didn't feel very grounded in that until I got out in the boat and we took in the moment readings of the water temperature. But even that's not showing us, it's showing us mostly 50 degrees. So I thought, okay, that sobered me up, even just seeing mostly 50 degrees, because for me that's I knew that I was going to have to focus and stay focused to swim through 50 degrees. Had I realized it was going to get down to 40s and high 40s, I don't know what I would have thought. I think I would have wondered if I could even start. We would have had to check to see how long I was going to be in that. There was more we'd have to work on had we seen actual 40-degree water temperature. I haven't trained in 40, so to hit that during an event had us all really focused and paying attention to what was going on.
So people just listening to this, there was a 20-degree Fahrenheit range on Karen's swim in your observer logs. We had 46. I saw 46 at one point and up to 64 close to the beginning. A 20-degree range. I mean, that's, Evan, you may be able to weigh in on how common that is or how much you've seen of that. But I mean, I don't think I've reviewed a swim that had a 20-degree Fahrenheit temperature range.
I can't recall ever seeing anything like that. The only one that comes close was at a swim last year that Amy Gubser did from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Farallon Islands. Again, this is Lake Superior. This is water that's never particularly warm. And so she starts off at about, I think, low 60s, maybe? Yeah, maybe high 50s. And then I think the lowest reading they got was 47 degrees out near the islands, which has just got to be totally debilitating at the end of a swim. even more so, I think, in freshwater. So just huge respect on persevering through that. But yeah, I just wanted to mention, I think if, you know, a lot of most marathon swimmers have swum in lakes, but maybe not most marathon swimmers have swum in the Great Lakes. And I think that just the sheer volume of water that the Great Lakes have, and the amount of, surface area they take up, I think perhaps most marathon swimmers haven't experienced the upwelling that can happen in these lakes. I remember I lived in Chicago for a year and swam in Lake Michigan pretty frequently, and just the rapidity with which the temperature can change is astonishing, even within the course of a little training swim. If
100%.
there's a wind coming out of a particular direction, it just blows all the warm water off the surface, and all of a sudden it's freezing cold.
Well, and then, and
Um,
as well, Evan, if you're, as you're in the bay, it's like the bay was 64. So like as we swim around a corner in one of these Great Lakes, that alone was holding in some warm water. So all of a sudden you swim, like you were saying, you swim a mile and it's dropped 10 degrees because you've rounded the corner and you're outside of a little bay, which is holding that water in. So that's another kind of a facet of swimming in one of the Great Lakes.
And for people listening who don't do Fahrenheit, so when we're saying 46, that's like 8 degrees Celsius up to 64, which is like, I don't know, 16 or 18 maybe Celsius. Um, so 8 to 18.
yeah.
And the other thing, Evan, you mentioned with Amy swim, and actually Karen with your swim has this in common as well. The water temperature is getting colder throughout the course of a very long swim.
Uh-huh.
And, I think most people listening can probably relate with this, but when the water temperature starts cold and warms up, maybe physiologically, I'm not sure how different that is, but mentally and just in terms of how maybe it is physiological, but that is a whole different experience when the water's getting colder versus when the water's getting warmer. So I wondered if you could speak a little bit to that. And I mean, did
Uh-huh.
it affect your pacing at all, or how you thought about wanting to make sure you had plenty of energy left at the end?
Mm.
I'm curious about that.
Yeah. I knew that it was a possibility because the water was so flat. I knew it was a possibility, even though it wasn't going to be able to be well predicted necessarily by us at the time. I think working with the captain, I think he'll be more aware of that as he plans future events with people. Um, but over this event, I had 62 and sunny for the first half. So I was living my dream. That's my sweet spot. Uh, it was fabulous. So I was making the most out of it. So I was charging along. I think a lot of us are used to doing swims that are longer than 14. So I felt really comfortable with the mileage. I knew I wanted to. I was the whole. I'm thinking through that first part, that first half. I'm thinking. I'm just hoping that it's going to remain warm as long as it can. I mean, I'm just living in the moment. But as I notice that water temperature start to drop in the next, hour and a half, through the 50s, I'm noticing it, but I'm not thinking about what the temperature is anymore. I'm just thinking about, because it doesn't matter. It's just what I'm in. This is what I'm thinking about, what my body is experiencing and how I'm responding. So I'm just making sure that my stroke is still functional, and and I'm swimming comfortably. I'm just kind of noticing the conditions, watching the people on my boat to make sure whatever they might want to communicate to me. So at that point, moving through the 50s, I'm still fairly comfortable. I was lucky enough to go to Cork Distance Week this year, and so I got a lot of great training in from 53 to 57 degrees there for 10 days, miles a day. It was fabulous. And I didn't have to worry about any jellyfish in Lake Superior.
Yeah.
So so that's like a little bonus. But as I noticed that thermocline rise towards the surface, that's when I started to notice that my nose and my lips and my chin were like burning. They just had a really big burning sensation. I think what was protecting my stomach was my swimsuit. I thought, well, that just feels cold, but it doesn't feel burning. So I knew that my boat, I had the feeling my boat didn't necessarily know what my experience was, because I could see that they were reading their thermometer, which was at the surface. And so I thought, they don't know, because I could tell my head wasn't in as cold a water as my nose and my lips and my chin. And so I just kept checking on myself. But when I stopped for a feeding, I let them know what I was experiencing, so they could start noting it. I didn't ask them what the temperature was, and I didn't know if maybe my body was just too tired to maintain my heat in the same way, and this was just a different experience I was having. I didn't think to ask. It didn't matter what the temperature was, as long as I was still functioning. It didn't matter. As long as I was still swimming, as long as my mind was still in it. And then as the thermocline reached all the way to the surface, so my whole body is in that cold water, I had to start falling back on some additional strategies, which are, I call them open water hundreds, but it's really just a way to vary my speed in a consistent pattern that allows me to try to create more heat by creating more speed. My support crew was reminding me to kick more, and that corrected my body position, and I felt a real big difference having, because they must have been seeing that I was sinking, my legs were sinking a little bit, so I'd kick a little bit more and correct my body position, and I could feel that made a big difference in my speed. So that felt great and reassuring in that moment, because I'm watching for signs of impact of this burning. Now all my skin is burning across my whole body. I noticed my hands started to curl slightly, but I was pleased that they weren't more curled, so that felt reassuring. I kept being reassured, and then I actually, after like 15 minutes, I realized the burning wasn't getting any worse. It stayed the same, and that was reassuring. I was like, well, it's not getting any worse. If I can keep doing this, I'll be fine. I'll be able to make it. I did, at a feeding, check in with my support crew and just said, really, can I do this? It's like, can I get there? And they're like, my husband is my primary support crew member. He's been on every single one of my major marathon swims. And so he doesn't usually tell me distances, because I don't usually believe what the boat says on distances. And I always usually add extra distance if they try to tell me something. So he doesn't usually tell me, but he knew that I didn't know how far I had left. And he's like, you've got 2 miles. You've got this. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, 2 miles, 2. And so I just got back at it. And the next time I popped up, to get a little more reassurance, he's like, you got a mile and a half. And I'm like, oh, okay, I really am making progress. So that I just needed more reassurance in this swim. So that was helpful, to have a crew member that knew me well enough to know that I wasn't going to ask what the distance was, but he knew I needed to know. He also knew that I was counting my feedings, which is how I mark my progress. And so he knew I only thought I had maybe gone halfway, but he knew that I didn't know I was as close to the finish as I was, because I was swimming faster than I had predicted I would. So he wanted to give me that reassurance, because he knew I thought I had half to go, and I was like, well, I can't do this for half. Well, one of the biggest things we learned is that if the water drops below 50 and I have 3 miles left, well, you might as well maybe just take me out. But if I have 2 miles left, well, maybe I can make it. I feel like unless I train under 50 degrees, I'm not going to be, unless I start training under 50 purposefully. I've just found my limit, I think. 2 miles is going to be my limit. I think 2 to 3 miles is my limit. If it's over 3, just let's try another day. That was pretty extreme.
Yeah, that really was a great description of the different types of strategies you used, and that other swimmers listening maybe can think about using to get through when things get extremely difficult, especially at the end of the swim. And you're so right about having a crew member that just kind of intuitively knows what you need to hear at that moment. And kudos to your husband for tuning into that and being able to give you that information when it was going to be beneficial to you.
For sure.
Yeah, I think when you get down into water temperatures like that, there's I'm not going to be able to reproduce exactly how she said this, but Courtney Polk was talking about she did a report on her Lake Tahoe swim recently where she didn't finish. But I found her report really profound. And she was talking about the importance of checking in with yourself. And I think this can only come with just massive amounts of experience and training, but the ability to kind of distinguish between when you're okay and when you're not okay. Now, being uncomfortable doesn't mean you're not okay. And the crew looking at the objective conditions, seeing the water temperature plunge under 50 degrees, may think, oh, she's not going to last long in this. But really, it's up to you to kind of, and you have the massive amounts of experience that I think are necessary to have this self-awareness even under duress, where you're checking in and it's like, okay, I'm uncomfortable, I'm in pain, am I okay? So what were your thoughts at the end there? Were you feeling like you were okay, or were you pretty close to thinking that it's time to call it?
Well, I feel like you're right as far as it really took both my husband and I and all the experience we've had together in this to get this one done. Up until that last quarter, the last quarter mile. I mean, one time around a high school track. I mean, you're so close. But I think that was what made this so tricky. I think that was the place at which, if it hadn't been so close, they would have needed to just call me over to the boat. If I had not been as close as a quarter of a mile, they would have just had to say, swim to the boat, and I would have made my way over to the boat. Because my vision went tunnel, and I had a hard time staying with the boat. I started hearing them yell, "Stay with the boat, stay with the boat," and I was like, "Okay, this is bad." In my head, so I have both. It's this. Both. I'm holding both. Oh, I'm confused. I can hear that I'm not staying with the boat. This is a problem. And I'm saying, oh, look at me, knowing that this is a problem and wanting to try to, and thinking about how to solve this. But at that very same time, my husband's getting in the rubber raft, the small raft that they had at the back of their larger boat. And he's like, he's coming over because he knows I'm not tracking the boat anymore, but he feels confident that I'm going to be able to track if he's closer. He had he been more than a quarter of a mile, they'd have had to call me to the boat and had to have me get out. I would have been able to swim to the boat to get out, but I wasn't going to be able to track the big boat. Had we not had the smaller boat for him to get closer to me, I wouldn't have been able to stay in. And I think that's when it got just a little bit on the risky side, because if I'm not able to track the bigger boat anymore, but at the same time, I'm saying, I know that's a problem. So I knew and my stroke was still functional. I did pull up more often in that last quarter mile just to keep checking in and getting reassurance. That yep, we're getting there. Yep, you're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. Start looking for the ground. You're gonna start seeing the rocks. And so it was really a team effort in that last quarter of a mile. But I think that's when we hit kind of that gray area, as far as what's too cold and what's really appropriate for my body. That's why I say had it been a half a mile shorter, it would have been less dramatic and a little more comfortable for everybody's emotions. And had it been a half mile longer, I would have had to get out because they'd had to just call me to the boat.
My experience with the Great Lakes is growing up in Michigan and swimming in Lake Michigan, Lake Superior, Lake Huron. I have not swum Lake Erie or Lake Ontario at all yet. But I remember that thermocline experience. So, you're swimming along and maybe your fingertips are like cold and your elbow's like warm. Why is my elbow warm? Well, I guess my stroke technique is good because that means my fingers are below my elbow. But yeah, I just kind of I guess I was kind of wondering about what you were saying just now about the kind of sort of shift in conscious awareness. Like you're like, okay, I'm not with the boat. That's a problem, but you can't quite get yourself over to the boat either. And a while ago, I interviewed a whole bunch of people who had lost consciousness while swimming
Mhm.
these long swims, and kind of just talked to them about their experiences and then wrote like a blog post about it. But one of the things that's really stood out was that people would have this experience of swimming along and actually feeling fine. Most of the people I talked to didn't even notice that they were cold. They were swimming along, and then the next thing they woke up and they were on the boat, or they were in the hospital, or
Mm.
they were on land. And your experience is really interesting because you actually did have you were very self-aware and very, very aware of your symptoms of getting colder and colder. And even I think most people can recall times when they were feeling cold in the water. But what's really interesting is you're aware of how your mental state was changing.
Mhm.
Um, so I talked with a physiologist who studies the effects of cold water on cognition, and it's somewhere around like 93 degrees body temperature Fahrenheit
Mm.
when you and it varies from person to person, situation is so like that's not like an exact number, but it's somewhere around that temperature. Core temperature is when your brain, the blood is flowing away from your brain and into your organ, your core, your vital organs, and so things get a little hazy.
Mhm.
Um, but in any case, did you notice like in that last little bit of the swim, did you notice any other changes in your cognition or your awareness as you got colder and colder and colder?
Yeah, I mean, I think there it's it's hard to I feel like because it's a little hard to piece everything together, there's probably moments where that do feel a little fuzzier. I mean, I feel like I had that tunnel vision, and I could see my husband in the little rubber raft right near me, and then I could see the underwater, and then I could see my husband, and then I could see underwater, and I felt like my vision distance, I couldn't process the distance to the end when he was like, it's like it's right there, 100 yards or whatever he might say to me. Couldn't process distance anymore, but I feel like. Were there moments I couldn't I don't quite fully feel like I was processing? Probably. I mean, it's like I can't tell you how long it felt to be in the water for that last quarter mile. I can't say, "Oh, that I took, this many minutes maybe." I feel like I wasn't processing time very well. Certainly wasn't processing distance very well. So there were ways. That's why it got so we were such in a gray area as far as should I have stayed in or should I have gotten out. It's because I was still making forward progress and I could still communicate that my husband felt like it was okay for me to stay in, and reassured me that we were going to make it. And then I needed it was a way different warming up than one of my general swims, right? One of the ones that I could get myself out of the water, swim back out to the boat, get on the boat, change my own clothes, get into my own dry clothes. This is very much similar. And the rewarming process was very similar to when I did freeze out of my first English Channel attempt. There's a lot of ways. So that experience of freezing out of my first English Channel attempt in 2015 gave me a lot to draw from in this moment. In 2015, when I experienced my first English Channel swim, I swam 12 hours before they pulled me out. I remember swimming the first 6 hours. I processed the second 6 hours like it was an hour and a half.
Huh.
So,
Wow.
so there was,
Yeah.
and because of that experience and then that rewarming experience after, that gave me a lot to draw on in this swim. So I was that's why I was so aware of being aware, because I
Mm.
remember I was so unaware of what was going on in English Channel. So it was very reassuring for me in this swim to recognize how aware I still was throughout.
Yeah, really speaks to Evan's point about having had that experience and then many other swimming experiences in the 10 years in between. I mean, you really have that breadth of experience to draw from to tell for yourself kind of like, where am I at with this? And I think experience will really build self-awareness. Like you start learning what things to pay attention to from your body as feedback and which things you should disregard as unimportant. But even growing up swimming, regularly and in a pool and all of that, like you learn to pay attention to certain things and other things aren't important. But then when you switch to open water, and especially switching to these longer swims or longer swims in cold open water, I think it's a completely different set of information that you want to process as important and pay attention to as feedback. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
So Karen, in preparation for this interview, I formatted and published your documentation to the MSF website just so we could, just so Jessica and I could look at it. I don't think you're aware of that, but it is up under 2025.
Does that mean it's like official?
Well, we still need to, the team needs to review it, but the first step is that the documentation is up and formatted. But this was just to kind of give us some ideas for talking to you. But one thing I noticed, and I don't know if you've or were aware of this or if you've seen this, but I noticed in this. So when I process the GPS data, I make a map to show your track, and then also make a little plot of your speed across time. And one thing that's really interesting in this, you were very consistent, even like at certain points you were swimming almost 4.5 kilometers an hour. And then about 2/3 of the way through, there was a sudden drop down to about 3.5, and then it kept descending down into about 2 kilometers per hour at the end. Now, I assume some of that is you're getting cold, but I'm thinking another part of it is there's probably some currents in Lake Superior. So are you aware of currents in Lake Superior, or were you aware of that happening at the time?
Good question. So of what the research and what I've read, the little bit that I've read, is that anything that resembles current in Lake Superior. So you're going to have things that maybe resemble current, but they're not predictable like an ocean. So there's other things that come into play, but they're not I don't think that they don't, you can't say at this time of day, or this is the way the current goes here. You might get a little of that based on the shape of the terrain, or the shape of the channel that you're swimming through. But I think there was a little bit of something once that it was so calm looking, but it felt like there was a lot going on in the water. When it was getting so cold, I felt like this looks really like, calm, uninteresting water, but there's a lot going on here when it's dropping from 62 all the way down to 46. And my husband also commented on the fact that there seemed to be a little bit of a push in some places, or in some amounts of time. My speed did drop considerably based on the cold, though, for sure. It was interesting in my documentation when I looked at what the observers wrote, and I saw, like, as the water temperature, they recorded the water temperature dropping, my stroke count would drop almost like as the water temperature was dropping. Strokes per minute dropped as what was just dropped quite a bit, at the same pace.
Yeah, I mean, based on the video that you uploaded to us, it looked like a very calm day, not much wind at all. But I mean, I know you're a pretty fast swimmer, Karen, but 4.5, even like 4.6 kilometers per hour. There's got to be a push happening, at least a little bit of a push. And then at the point you're going 4.5, and then the very next dot, which is 10 minutes later, is under 3.5. So I haven't pulled up exactly where that appears on the map here, but so clearly it's not just huge variations in temperature, but there is a lot going on.
There's a lot going on.
It's just a extremely dynamic body of water, which I guess you would expect from something that big. But again, if you haven't swum in lakes as large as Superior or Lake Michigan, you may not be familiar with these dynamics in freshwater. But sure makes it interesting.
Yeah, I think on your log, you had wind up to 5.6 miles an hour, and it at different times it was coming from different directions. So like,
Because the terrain, it's like because the island is where it is, because the mainland is shaped the way it is, it really is, it's really dynamic. It's like further out on the lake, I'm sure it was more consistently pushing towards the east. Right there in that area by, in that channel, by that close to shore, that's impacting how the wind is showing up.
yeah, that's one of the things that makes this swim really impressive to me and exciting, I guess, is a good word, because of, like Evan said, it just so dynamic and interesting and intriguing. It's not just like, oh, you got in a body of water and you swam for a while and then you got to the other side. Like, they're just like you guys are saying, there's so much going on. And how do you anticipate that, plan for that, train for that, all of those things? So it just makes it really interesting.
So you alluded to this briefly at the beginning, but there've been a few other swims in Lake Superior. So your route from Isle Royale to Pigeon Point was the first in that section of Lake Superior, but there were, as far as I can tell, 3 swims over in the western part of Lake Superior. Vicky Keith in 1988, Paula Stephenson in 2007, and then most recently Brian Huffman. And then in eastern Lake Superior, Marilyn Korzequa and Liz Fry did I think about a 19-kilometer route. And then there's that relay that you were on, right? Were you on that relay?
Yeah.
Along the coast that finished in Duluth. So just a huge variety of routes that people have done, but I think it's still kind of a criminally underswum lake. How would you describe, I'm going to compare and contrast the different routes that people have taken so far?
Oh, well, the one I'm most familiar with, of course, is the North Route, which is the one I just completed, the Isle Royale. I have taken a look at their routes. I've swum along the shore as far as the one that Brian just finished. I have swum along both sides of those shores, training for my other swims. I've never swum across there. It's I mean, it's such a large lake. It's almost hard to find some certain crossings, right? Because it's so large. It's like, does anybody want to swim 300 miles? It's like you have to find those areas where there's like an actual doable crossing, which is something under 50 miles. So, and then they're there. And I think as we develop a resource with captains that people could reach out to, maybe we'll see more people trying more things. We can also do the things that have already been, like this western crossing and the eastern crossing. It's like, let's go. That sounds interesting. Let's go see those. And then there's tons of lighthouses. Let's find a couple of lighthouses and swim a lighthouse swim. I'm ready. Let's do it. The Apostle Islands is full of cool things to wonder and swim. I mean, people recreationally sometimes go and camp on the Apostle Islands and then swim around different Apostle Islands. Cool. That sounds great. There's lots to do, but it's still, at the same time, it's such an enormous lake. Sometimes it's hard to find what's considered a crossing. It's like, mine was a little over 14 miles. I crossed. It's like Catalina Channel. You're starting at a little island and you're swimming into the mainland. This is similar, but only 14 miles. It's a shipping lane. Ships between Thunder Bay and Duluth can go through that same route. So it felt like, well, maybe that feels like an official crossing if there's an actual shipping lane in there. Yeah, it's like there's a lot to do. It's like, let's come on, you guys. I'll put the resource up there in January, and people can take a look and see if they want to come. It was dramatic that day. Some days you're going to get 62 and sunny the whole way across. I promise.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how routes develop over the course of history, and in particular body of water. And obviously, like as you mentioned, Lake Superior is so big that certainly as a solo swimmer, no one's ever going to actually cross the full length of it or the full width of it. And so it's a matter of finding a route that makes sense given the geography. And I think, sometimes if you're, a partial crossing can kind of feel like, oh, well, you could have made it longer just by going further. But I think that's not the case with the route you did. That route that you did seems like it makes all sorts of sense given the geography of the lake. You started on an island, you swam into the mainland. You can't make it a better route by swimming further. I mean, that's the channel crossing. So I just really like it. I mean, I think if I had to choose one, that's the one I do. I'm certainly not trained up for that water temperature here in Sydney, but
Yeah.
to me, that's the one that, aesthetically speaking, the route that you did is just really beautiful. So
It
I
was
appreciate that
amazing.
you did it.
I loved that I landed right on the point of Minnesota. The point of Minnesota is a peninsula, and I landed right on the end, the very end. And I was like, oh, good. It was fun.
Yeah,
That's
I
so
mean, even
cool.
on a really zoomed out map, you can see where that point is in the state of
Yeah.
Minnesota, and so yeah, that's super cool. And
Thanks.
then I guess another complication with Lake Superior is that it has an international border.
Oh,
Um, so I guess if you were trying to do a route crossing the border, would probably bring up all kinds of issues with
yeah.
the
I
Coast
think,
Guard and
yeah, I think the East crossing is actually across a border.
right.
And so I think I was thinking that through with my husband. We like, well, maybe we would like start just go, the regular border, go through the border into Canada in a car, start on the Canada side, and then swim to America because we're allowed in America, and then boat back and or have somebody drive our car back around to America. I mean, it's like what is the logistics? I know that there's remote access permits, but right now because of the political stuff that's going on, it's hard to get a remote access permit. Because I looked into that in case the wind blew me off course and I needed to swim and land in Canada. And then I learned that it's not a problem for us to be in the water in Canada. It doesn't get it to be a problem until you step all the way out of the water and you're on all the way on the land. So that's when you'd like a remote access permit. And they're affordable, but they're not attainable this year.
Hmm.
So maybe another time. So that's probably what we would do if when I have a chance to do the East Crossing. Um, if that's an opportunity, it's certainly an easy way to do it. Get that remote access permit.
Yeah, it would be an interesting list to come up with kind of lake swims or just swims in any body of water that cross international
Oh,
boundaries. I think that's one of the big appeals of that Lake Memphremagog swim, and also although I guess the Lake Ontario swim people don't cross the border, but you could. And what's interesting is with Lake Ontario is the first Marilyn Bell swim actually started on the other side of the Niagara River in the U.S. So hers crossed the border, but all the modern Lake Ontario swims are fully in Canada.
oh,
Just off topic, I guess, but
yeah. No, interesting.
It adds another layer of logistics. So for folks crossing borders, yeah, it might be fun to give them some credit having a list of swims that do that. Because I
Uh-huh.
mean it's a big deal, and especially with self-organized swims, I think that's an added layer for people to figure out on their own. And swim associations usually do a really good job of connecting swimmers with the logistics of border crossings.
Uh-huh.
Like in the English Channel, you don't have to think about crossing the border. Your captain's got that all figured out for you. You just give him your passport, and that's really all there is to it. But if you're doing it on your own, yeah, you got to do the research, learn about remote access permits or what other things are required. And on a situation like right now, where I just learned for myself that those aren't available, makes things more challenging logistically.
anything else, Jess?
I think I've gone through most of my questions, and I think that, Karen, you've done a really good job of explaining this in a way that's really appealing to other swimmers.
I
And
hope so.
that's definitely, yeah. Well, I mean, it's an amazing lake. Like Evan said, most of us haven't gotten the opportunity to swim long swims in Great Lakes before. They're, even for somebody like me growing up in Michigan, it's pretty daunting, especially coming at it from a self-organized standpoint with, Lake Michigan and Lake Superior and the lakes that don't have orgs, like Lake Huron. Um, so, but the water, for people who have not swum in these lakes, the water is like heartbreakingly clear. I mean, it's amazing, and there's all kinds of history and cultural significance to these lakes. And like Karen was saying, they're huge. Like, these are ocean lakes, ocean-sized lakes. And there's no sharks, there's no jellyfish. There, like, what's the saying? No sharks, no salt, no sharks, no problem, or whatever. I see that everywhere whenever I go to Michigan. But yeah, so that really covers it for me. Evan, do you have anything else?
Yeah, last question on my end. So I mentioned at the beginning, Minnesota's the land of 10,000 lakes, and I was reading the Wikipedia entry, and it turns out it's actually 14,420 bodies of fresh water, covering at least 10 acres. So somebody has counted.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how many of them have you swum in, Karen?
Oh, well, I have my favorites. So I stick to my favorites, the ones that are close to home, that are easy to train in. But Mille Lacs is another opportunity for Minnesotans. It's kind of our local Tahoe size lake. It's not as deep as Tahoe by far, but it's like the size of Tahoe. So that's one that we use as a training swim often. So people could come do that. I don't know. They could come swim the Red River on our border with North Dakota. You've been there and done that, Evan.
Oh, I have. Well, so has Jessica, actually.
Oh, okay.
That was my first like full length marathon swim.
Wow.
Oh,
That could be a hot one.
I had a great time there. It was right after, a few months after I moved to Sydney. It was my first trip back to the States in a while, and I just love the whole vibe of the place, and the river too was incredibly beautiful, which I didn't have a sense of before swimming it, but just the landscape as you're swimming along was super nice.
Yeah, and the conditions can be so wildly different from year to year there. It's also because it's so curvy, and it can be moving so fast that it can have a lot of sediment that's churned up in it. So it's from a clarity standpoint, it's the least clear thing I've ever swum in.
But it's like chocolate milk. Yeah. Yeah. That was very what's the word? Turbid or high turbidity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Loved it though.
So anything for us, Karen? Ask us anything.
Oh my gosh. Well, what I was surprised about when I came off of this swim is that you posted something on MSF so quickly about my swim. And I was curious I know that you really appreciate a pioneer swim, but I wondered if, what because I ended up swimming what captured your attention and people's attention about this swim was the fact that it went under 50 for so long, or what was it about this that made people respond?
That post was, if not the most engaged post of the year, certainly in the top 2 or 3. Really got a lot of engagement. I mean, I can't speak to everyone else, but to me, you told me about it ahead of time, and so I kind of pulled it up on a map, and I was like, oh, that's a really cool route. And so I was looking forward to seeing you do it, and I tracked you and was excited that you finished. And so I was motivated to do a post about it. As for what captured the imagination of everyone else, I think, the temperature was probably a pretty big part of it. I think people can't even imagine 46 degrees for that distance and time. I know it wasn't the whole time.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. And because so many people,
nonetheless.
Thank you. I'm so, because when I look at people swim and what they swim in for the North Channel, they're like in the low 50s for the whole time. And so that's so I'm so intimidated a little bit by that that I wasn't that I'm so impressed by the people that are getting across the North Channel in those temperatures. That I didn't maybe understand quite that that how I mean how unusual it is to swim under 50. I thought people must be doing it. It just wasn't me. So I just had an opportunity with the boat so nearby that I thought this is a good time. My safety is right there. So I felt like I could push my limit for sure.
I'm going to also throw out there that um, it, I 100% agree with what Evan just said about like what was exciting to me about it was, oh wow, this is Lake Superior. We just don't get very many swims in Lake Superior, and the water temperature was really impressive to me personally, because I'm also very intimidated by people who can swim in cold temperatures. And my local lake gets down to about 46 in the winter, and I can do it for 20 minutes, and that's all I'm good for that.
Good
Um,
job.
but I'm also going to throw this out there. Like, I mean, some of it might be you, it might be your personality, and that you've been in the sport for a long time, and you're nice to people and supportive of other people. And I I don't know, like when it's really fun to support people that you know and that have been supportive to you or other people you know. And um I don't know. I think that what I've noticed is that the community of marathon swimmers gets pretty fired up when they see somebody that they've interacted with or heard about before and that they're maybe a bit of a fan of do something outstanding that they're feeling good about. I think we all just kind of get a little, you know, a little jazzed about it and want to tell everyone.
Well, it's
So,
true. It is
yeah.
fun as I've met more people around the world to just hear about what they're doing. And that's it's nice to have those different communities that bring such. I mean, we're such a spread out community that it's nice to have like certain Facebook sites that help hold us together as a community, like MSF, um, and to be that connector. So. Um, yeah, so I appreciate just a chance to connect with you guys today too.
Yeah, and
Thank you so
I
much.
want to personally thank you for putting the effort into documenting the swim and sending it to us. It to me, it's not about ratification or being official or anything. The way the project originally developed it was we wanted to give people the chance to document what they did and put it out there for the kind of education and inspiration of the rest of the community. And that your swim very much did that for me. And I really love the detail that you put into it. And your observer and Tom and you all just did a great job. So
Thank you.
it's always nice to see that.
Thanks. Well, I am happy to share this and share and invite people to reach out to me. I'll put the information on the website on our website and promote that in some way, shape, or form here so people know how to find it. It's starting in January, I hope.
Yeah, that'd be great, and I'm sure we'll see that, but send it over to us anyway, just so we can also,
Great.
let people know, because
Great.
that's really the exact type of thing that makes the documentation so helpful. And I've talked to a few other people recently who did kind of wanted to document their swim for similar reasons, like they wanted other people to know how do I swim here? What are the route possibilities? Or um, sometimes people will go through other people's documented swims and read the observer logs for those swims, or look at the speed plots, or look at what was the temperature during this month. And so the way that you wrote your narrative was just very clearly like what information would be helpful to other people. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'll second Evan's thank you for sending it in, and we then get to make it available on our website. So
Mhm. Well, thank you for what you guys do. It's amazing. what you've started here.
Oh, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think that's about covers it, and we're just about over an hour. Karen, thank you very much for joining us on the inaugural podcast. I think this was a lot of fun. So,
Right.
thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.